So now let's try an example where we're still verifying, but now we want to convert to sine and cosine. So we have tangent of x equals cosecant of x, and that equals secant of x. So tangent of x times cosecant of x equals secant of x. So let's convert everything. Tangent is sine of x over cosine of x. We multiply by that. Cosine of x is cosecant of x, is 1 over sine of x. So the signs cancel. We're left with 1 over cosine of x. And 1 over cosine of x is secant of x. Letter B. So let's start on the left side because we're adding. So this is sine of x over cosine of x plus cosine of x over sine of x. In this case, we want to get a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply sine of x to the first one and then cosine of x to the one on the right. Then we simplify. This is sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x over sine of x times cosine of x. Remember that sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x, that's just 1. So 1 over sine of x times cosine of x. And some of you can see it, but if not, we can separate it into two separate ones. So you can see that 1 over sine of x is just cosecant of x, and 1 over cosine of x is just secant of x. And so that verifies. Try the example here. So try this out. The first example is very similar to the one above. You get cosecant of x, so you just convert it cosine sine times 1 over cosine. Cosines cancel out. And for letter B, you change it to 1 over sine of x minus sine of x. You multiply sine of x to the numerator and denominator to get a common denominator so we can combine them. And notice it becomes 1 minus sine squared of x over sine of x. 1 minus sine squared of x becomes cosine squared of x. Then let's split it up. We're going to split it up to cosine of x, all over sine of x. I can group the cosine and sine together. That becomes cotangent of x. And then cosine of x, you just leave there. Okay, we're going to simplify this so it's not in fractional form, just as kind of a little review. And so what we want to do is we're going to multiply by the conjugate. So let's multiply by 1 plus cosine of x over 1 plus cosine of x. So it becomes 1 plus cosine of x all over, let's multiply it, 1 minus cosine squared of x. So 1 minus cosine squared of x becomes sine squared of x. And one way to finish that, so it's not in fractional form, is just to move the sine squared of x to the numerator. And to do that, sine squared of x becomes cosecant squared of x, and then multiply the 1 plus cosine of x. So there's an example of converting it so it's not in fractional form. Okay, let's verify this identity. Let's start on the right side. So we have cosine of x over 1 minus sine of x, and let's multiply by the conjugate. 1 plus sine of x times 1 plus sine of x. So this becomes cosine of x times 1 plus sine of x over 1 minus sine squared of x. Then we have cosine of x times 1, I'm just rewriting it. We're going to change 1 minus sine squared of x to, that's cosine squared of x. Notice I can cancel out one of the cosines. So cosine, it cancels out one of the cosines in the denominator. So I have 1 plus sine of x all over cosine of x. Now it's still in fractional form. And so one way that we can deal with this is let's split this fraction up. So what's going to happen is now this is going to be 1 over cosine of x. So I just took 1 and then the cosine. And then now we're going to take the other one. We're going to add sine of x over cosine of x. So plus sine of x over cosine of x. So now we can change this. Now just to verify, looking at this, we did this before, I think, in the previous lesson. And so remember that if I tried to, since I have a common denominator, I could add this and make it under the same denominator, right? So just looking at this, and we can split this up, that's okay, because notice the common denominator. And if I were to put it all under one fraction bar, I just add it. Okay, so hopefully you see that that is okay to do. Now 1 over cosine of x, that becomes secant of x, plus sine of x over cosine of x is just tangent of x. And so there we have verified. So try this example. Verify the identity cosecant of x plus cotangent of x. And again, try working on this right side first. Okay, so it's very similar to the other one, so it was good to just be able to practice and try it on your own. So multiplying by the conjugate, you get sine of x times 1 plus cosine of x all over 1 minus cosine squared of x. 1 minus cosine squared of x changes to sine squared of x, and we can cancel the sign in the numerator and denominator. Then we have this, then we could split up the fraction, and then convert everything to these.